Hi everyone, my name's Ava and I'm a UCL PhD student at UCL's Division of Psychiatry. I'm going to be talking to you about my UCL Yale exchange program that I went on, my experiences of the exchange itself, how I actually got onto the exchange program and the study and what I actually undertook when I was there, and my experiences of New Haven as a whole. So firstly, the UCL Yale exchange is for PhD students who are interested in increasing their research network to departments within Yale. So it's important that you undertake one study that may or may not be used for your actual PhD, but is relevant to your PhD to increase your research skills. So the study that I ended up doing is not going to be part of my PhD thesis, however, it is related to the thesis as a whole. So on average, the exchange lasts around 3 months. However, this depends on your specific exchange as it's different for every person. Mine was 2 months, and that was because it coincided with a conference that I then attended in Toronto. So for this, I emailed lots of different supervisors who had similar research interests to me to see if they'd be interested in supervising me and taking this on. So this did involve a lot of emailing as well as having initial meetings to see if our research interests did overlap and if they were able to feasibly take me on for a couple of months in order to undertake a study using a data set that they had. Of course, this will vary for each person and depends on your certain research interest. This did take me quite a while, but in the end, I was really glad with the person who supervised me. Of course, the first step is to talk to your initial UCL supervisor about it to see if it's something that would feasibly be able to do at a stage of your PhD. We decided that third year for 2 months was the most suitable time for me to do it in between my studies that I was currently undertaking. So after getting approval from your supervisor, as well as having these initial meetings and then having a consensus with someone at Yale that they are willing to supervise you, there is a long application form in which you describe exactly what you would be doing in Yale, why exactly you feel like you should go, what kind of skills you'll build up, as well as the statements from both your supervisor, the Yale supervisor, and the head of department. There is also a funding section for this, which is part of the application if you want to ask for funding, which is what I did. And the funding maximum is $6,000, which was the maximum that I managed to get. And this was just because I was able to fully compute the amount that would be required for accommodation, living expenses, etc. So once I had completed this, I went through the different stages of authorization, which then led on to applying for a student visa. This definitely took the longest time, and I would say for me personally, it was actually harder and longer to go through this process than the initial application itself, although that can be quite difficult depending on your circumstance. So it's important to make sure that you apply for a student visa early enough. And there are different deadlines. I think there are 3 deadlines a year relating to when you should apply for the exchange program. So my department itself was a really friendly department of a small lab group of around 5 postgraduate students, and it was really nice to be able to get to know them within the lab meetings that we had weekly, which was also combined with other labs, so we were able to see different individuals' results as there was always a presentation every week. So I was conducting a neuroimaging study using the neuroimaging data set of Naples that was already there, as well as looking at performance on different memory tasks and how this was related to developmental trauma and psychosis. In my current PhD, I am looking at structural MRI, but had not done much on functional brain activity, so it was really interesting learning a new method in order to conduct this study with the help of some of the postgrads who were already in the department. So it's definitely important when you're going on the exchange to think of different ways that you can socialize and build your bubble while you're there so that you don't feel so isolated. So firstly, it's about trying to understand what the department is like. So when you speak to the Yale supervisor, asking how big the lab group is and asking how often individuals come in, just so you can see what your expectations are like before you go there. New Haven itself is really pretty. The Yale campus is really nice, and they have a massive gym that used to be a chapel. So it's in this massive church, and it's actually free for students as well as exchange students. So I was able to use that for free. And the actual campus itself, so I was in the psychiatry department, and this was an amazing department and really pretty, and the old campus itself is just really walkable and nice to walk around. I was there between March and May, and while in March it was quite windy and cold, in May, in the springtime, everything did definitely come to life more. I think one of the biggest things that I did in New Haven was a lot of hiking, so of East Rock and West Rock, which are two areas that you can take a bus to. So East Rock is an area where most students live. I did not live in that area, but I would definitely recommend looking at places in East Rock. I think generally in the US and in New Haven in particular, some areas can be a bit more dangerous than others, so it's very important that you try and sort out accommodation in specific areas, mainly in East Rock, as that's where most of the students are. While I was in New Haven, there was also a cherry blossom festival, which is when the cherry blossoms bloom in Worcester Square, which is an area with Italian restaurants and more residential, but a really pretty area that you need to visit. Also, there was a Spring Fling Festival, which was for students, but Yale exchange students can also attend. There are other things that you can do in New Haven. There are some art galleries and museums. There's the rare book and manuscript library of different manuscripts and old books. The Yale University Art Gallery is also free and really interesting to go into. There were some other museums that were closed during the time I was there, but I would definitely visit if I was to go in the future. Also, the beach is not very far away and there are different beaches you can go to via bus. In terms of food, New Haven is known for its pizza. Frank Pepe is definitely somewhere I would recommend going. And my other favorite restaurants were Tibetan Kitchen and Sher Khan. There is also a lot of theaters in which there are different plays performed, which would be really interesting to go to, and different venues for different music gigs, but of course this depends on the time of year that you go. Also, what's great about New Haven is New York and Boston are not far away and they only take a few hours to get there, so on the weekends I would go to New York and Boston via train. New Haven itself is very pretty and very green, especially during spring and summer. It is more of a small town vibe compared to London, so while there are lots of things to do, I think it's important to consider that. However, it's actually quite a nice place to live, and knowing that on the weekends you can go to New York and Boston. What I really enjoyed about my exchange was the research skills that I gained and being able to be in contact with different lab groups and having a really good supervisor who was really helpful in helping me feel accommodated within this well-renowned US university. Yale campus itself is beautiful and I do still miss walking around it, especially during summer months. And I do think I will miss the hiking at East Rock and West Rock now that I am back in living in London. My top tips for the application would be to look early at applying for visa and contacting as many supervisors as you can in Yale to make it easier to be able to find someone. My tips in Yale would be to keep in contact with the Yale Exchange Department, which you'll receive a lot of emails from if you do go on the exchange, as there are different events that can help increase your social circle when you're new to the area. So my tips on living in New Haven would be to consider what exactly I enjoy doing. Do you like hiking and being more outdoors, or spending your weekends on city breaks, Boston and New York as examples? And I would also think about where is best to live, as can be quite hard to navigate when you can't get specifically Yale accommodation if you're staying for a short amount of time. So thinking of areas like East Rock and understanding the community in which you're going to live in if you are picking Airbnbs or more independent accommodations. So I hope this gave you a bit of an understanding into what the UCL Yale exchange program is like, as well as my experiences and tips of this. Have a good day.